The 13 Architects. Fluorescent strip lights blazed harsh, unforgiving brightness across the top-floor design studio long after every other department within the downtown glass office block had clocked out for the night, drowning the entire open workspace in a sterile white glow that bleached every warm tone from the room's surfaces. Rows upon rows of oversized architectural renderings lined every plaster wall, secured by thin metal display rails, stacked scaled structural models of residential towers. Mixed-use plazas and civic cultural centers occupied every available oak work table, their foam and timber frames dusted lightly after months of back-to-back revisions. Piles of crumpled disposable coffee cups ringed with dark brown tannin stains littered desk edges, alongside dog-eared engineering manuals, rolls of drafting trace paper, wireless stylus chargers, and half-empty tubes of archival ink pens that had run dry across hundreds of late-night project sprints. I sank back into an ergonomic leather office chair, my shoulders heavy with 6 straight years of unbroken overtime, and fixed my gaze on the ultra-wide high-definition monitor mounted before me. The screen glowed with a high-resolution digital scan of the International Urban Architecture Competition Grand Prize certificate our team had secured earlier that quarter. An award that had catapulted Hale architecture onto global industry rankings, drawing dozens of high-net-worth commercial developers to submit custom project inquiries week after week. My cursor drifted lazily across the desktop until it landed on the corporate email inbox icon, double-clicking to open a flagged internal memo sent exactly 60 minutes prior by the CEO's personal administrative assistant. The subject line alone sent a cold, leaden weight plummeting straight to the pit of my stomach, settling heavy over my lungs and stealing half the air from each slow breath I drew. Year-end bonus allocation notice. Full firm distribution breakdown. I scrolled line by line through the formatted spreadsheet attachment, my jaw gradually tightening as each department's compensation tier unfolded before my eyes. Every division under the marketing umbrella, brand outreach, client liaison, media production, and regional event coordination qualified for 100% of their scheduled annual performance bonuses, plus tiered permanent base salary raises ranging from 8 to 15%, and expanded annual professional development stipends covering international industry conferences, private marketing workshops, and premium client hospitality training. Further down the document, a single isolated paragraph dedicated entirely to architecture and design sat stark against the white page, its black-typed text blunt, unsoftened, and utterly without room for negotiation. Year-end bonus allocation for all design, structural engineering, and rendering staff, $0. All discretionary corporate fiscal reserves have been fully reallocated to fund the marketing division's 2026 cross-regional client acquisition growth initiative, per unanimous executive board vote held last week. No supplementary performance compensation will be issued to design personnel for this fiscal cycle. There would no appeals process, no budget reconsideration hearings, no opportunity to submit formal performance review rebuttals to executive leadership. The verdict was final. Carved into corporate policy before any of our 17-person crew had even finished drafting the final construction blueprints for the award-winning cultural center that had generated millions in new lead revenue for Hale over the past 12 months. No sudden burst of fiery rage flooded my chest, no impulse to slam my fist against the monitor frame or storm down the carpeted executive hallway to demand an unplanned audience with Paul Henderson, the firm's arrogant, profit-obsessed chief executive. What washed over me instead was a deep, hollow, bone-deep weariness that had been quietly building beneath every late-night drafting session, every skipped family dinner, every weekend sacrifice to hit impossible project deadlines Paul had arbitrarily imposed without a single word of extra pay offered. I reached out to grasp my smartphone resting beside the keyboard, thumb brushing the cold glass screen as I unlocked the device and navigated to a group chat thread I'd barely touched in more than 2 full calendar years. The chat header read the 13 Architects, a nickname our core crew had coined during our first brutal 3-week all-nighter back when we were all junior staff fresh out of university, surviving on gas station energy drinks and cold takeout sandwiches while finalizing the firm's first large municipal development bid. 17 names populated the contact list: myself, lead design director; Leo Hayes, senior structural engineer I'd personally recruited straight out of graduate internship. Marcus Reed, lead commercial framing specialist. Chloe Bennett, our sole senior rendering artist balancing a newborn infant at home, alongside Jasper, Tyler, Milo, Elias, Clara, Dean, and 8 other dedicated licensed architects and technical draftsmen who'd built Hale's entire award-winning portfolio from absolute zero. My thumbs hovered over the text input bar for a full 15 heartbeats, sorting through every word to avoid premature, unplanned panic that might fragment our unified front before we'd fully mapped our exit strategy. At last, I tapped out a short, unembellished message and hit send without a second thought. Every designer and engineer on our team receives 0 year-end bonus this year. I am drafting formal resignation paperwork and submitting it first thing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Everyone's choice is their own, but I wanted to share the news immediately. 60 seconds of dead silence ticked by on the phone's digital clock before overlapping notification chimes exploded in rapid, chaotic bursts across the quiet studio space, each staff member's mobile lighting up one after another. The chat feed flooded with identical single-word replies stacked unbroken atop one another, a seamless, unshakable chorus forged from thousands of shared uncompensated labor hours and years of unacknowledged creative sacrifice. Leave. 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 13 identical short responses scrolling endlessly down the display, each carrying the exact quiet resolve that had taken root in every member's chest the second they processed the executive memo's brutal verdict. Spreadsheets, quarterly profit statements, audited fiscal reports, all cold, clinical numerical data tracked by corporate accounting departments never lied. They laid bare the raw, unvarnished inner mechanics of a business without softening language or hollow performative gestures of gratitude for frontline staff. Yet those same stark printed figures often inflicted a sharper, more lingering wound than any calculated lie a self-serving executive might craft to pacify burnt-out, overworked teams mid-year. That bitter, unshakable reality settled heavy in my ribcage halfway through Hale's annual year-end awards banquet, a lavish formal event hosted within a vaulted downtown ballroom lined with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling marble columns. I sat rigid in a thin padded folding banquet chair, the scratchy fabric of my charcoal wool blazer irritating my shoulders as my gaze remained locked on the massive floor-mounted projection screen dominating the front stage. Bold gold sans serif lettering blared out for every seated attendee to absorb without distraction. Hale Architectural Design Division, 2025 Annual Performance Bonus, $0. The words hung suspended against a deep navy digital backdrop, broadcast simultaneously across every secondary side screen lining the venue's perimeter walls, so no guest could miss the executive board's decisive judgment against our department's collective year of groundbreaking work. I did not raise my voice, slam stemmed glassware against the linen-covered tabletop, or march up the carpeted central aisle to interrupt Paul's keynote address. I remained motionless, fingers tapping a slow, measured rhythm against the polished mahogany table hidden beneath starched white banquet linens, and pulled my cell phone from the blazer's inner breast pocket once more to type a second quiet update into the 13 Architects group chat as Paul's booming, amplified voice echoed off the ballroom's high plaster ceilings, bouncing across hundreds of seated staff and invited industry clients. There will be no bonus payout for any of our crew. We need to begin formal exit planning before the winter holiday shutdown commences next Monday. That group thread had originated 6 years prior, during our first marathon stretch of back-to-back all-nighters drafting preliminary site layouts for a low-income community housing complex. Long before Paul's unchecked corporate greed and obsession with superficial brand expansion had eroded every shred of mutual respect between executive leadership and the design team that generated nearly 2/3 of the firm's total annual revenue. Paul Henderson stood dead center of the raised banquet stage, one large palm wrapped tight around a chrome-plated wireless microphone, his broad frame held in a rigid, practiced posture honed over 15 years of corporate keynote speeches and investor galas. Every small movement, slow sweeping gaze across the crowd, deliberate pause between sentences, faint self-satisfied smirk tugging at the corner of his jaw, had been rehearsed endlessly to manufacture an air of unassailable executive authority. Designed to sway employee sentiment toward his profit-driven strategic agenda whenever a conflict of interest arose between staff compensation and shareholder quarterly gains. After months of exhaustive cross-department deliberation, countless forecasting models, and direct consultation with our external financial advisory board, Paul drawled, stretching out each syllable in the smooth, honeyed cadence he reserved for wealthy real estate developers and regional investors, the firm's executive board has formally locked in this fiscal cycle's discretionary bonus distribution framework. Every available pool of untethered corporate capital will be fully redirected to bolster the marketing division's client acquisition expansion campaign across all 4 regional operational zones this coming calendar year. He paused for 3 full beats, letting the uncomfortable, weighty silence sink into every corner of the cavernous ballroom before his eyes drifted deliberately to the far rear of the venue, where our entire 17-person design crew sat clustered around 2 small, isolated round tables pushed against a blank stone wall, cut off from the rest of the firm's departments as if our labor held no measurable value to the company's bottom line. I fully acknowledge many members of the architectural and engineering staff may harbor lingering disappointment regarding this restructuring decision. He softened his tone into a patronizing, falsely paternal register crafted to win neutral onlookers' superficial sympathy. I do not dismiss the hundreds of late nights each of you logged refining legacy client project revisions and executing routine site oversight walkthroughs. But a commercial enterprise cannot sustain long-term industry growth if it only devotes financial resources to preserving pre-existing business partnerships. The marketing team stepped entirely outside their established comfort zones this fiscal cycle, securing 3 landmark high-rise commercial development clients with 0 prior regional market brand recognition to leverage as a starting point. That fearless, forward-focused expansion mindset is precisely the strategic priority this board intends to prioritize above all other operational concerns moving forward. The warm veneer of manufactured empathy evaporated in an instant, his voice sharpening into a cold, dismissive drawl as he delivered the final, cutting judgment that erased every ounce of our team's 12 months of award-winning labor in a handful of careless words. Merely maintaining established client relationships constitutes stagnant business maintenance work, lacking the progressive growth momentum required to hit next year's aggressive multi-million-dollar revenue expansion targets. A faint, bitter, mirthless smile tugged at the corner of my lips as my mind raced through every verified financial metric printed within Hale's third-quarter fiscal report released just 3 weeks prior. Each data point a stark contradiction to Paul's one-sided narrative delivered to the banquet crowd. The internationally celebrated Civic Cultural Center design our crew had conceptualized, drafted, structurally engineered and revised over 6 straight 12-hour workdays with 0 overtime compensation had swept 3 separate global architecture competition trophies, lifting Hale's international industry standing from a minor regional firm to a name recognized by developers across Europe, North America, and East Asia. That single landmark project alone had generated $1.7 million in pure design fee revenue, deposited directly into the firm's corporate accounts. The 3 longest-running, highest client satisfaction development partnerships within Hale's entire portfolio, luxury, mixed-use towers, suburban residential master plants, and downtown commercial plazas, all trace their conceptual origins back to our design division's collaborative brainstorming sessions and endless rounds of client-altered blueprint refinements. Independent auditor reports confirmed a full 65% of the firm's total annual gross profit stream originated from projects our 17-person crew had built from blank digital canvases. Yet Paul had dismissed all that revenue-generating creative labor as meaningless, static maintenance before a room full of peers, industry contacts, and junior entry-level staff members. To my immediate left sat Leo Hayes, our senior lead structural engineer and my most trusted long-term collaborator, a sharp, meticulous specialist I'd recruited fresh out of postgraduate internship training 5 years earlier and mentored through dozens of complex steel-framed construction challenges spanning residential and commercial builds alike. Leo's broad, muscular shoulders trembled with barely suppressed white-hot frustration beneath his navy banquet blazer. His large, permanently calloused drafting hands squeezed a linen dinner napkin so hard the fabric crumpled into a tight, wrinkled ball. Every knuckle bleached stark pale beneath warm, overhead chandelier lighting. 3 distinct times I watched him shift forward in his chair, hips lifting slightly off the padded seat as he prepared to stand and march down the banquet aisle to confront Paul mid-keynote, and 3 times I shot him a sharp, silent sideways warning glance that froze every muscle in his torso mid-movement, holding his boiling anger firmly in check to avoid walking straight into the prefabricated trap the CEO had laid for our team that entire evening. I'd spent months anticipating this exact manufactured conflict scenario, mapping out every catastrophic professional consequence our entire crew would face if we lost our composure in front of witnesses that night. Paul had spent years hunting for a public display of design division insubordination he could weaponize to justify mass termination with 0 severance packages owed to our staff. If any one of us raised our voice or staged a disruptive protest during the keynote address, he would immediately frame every architect and engineer as ungrateful, hostile team players unworthy of continued corporate investment, circulating biased internal memos to every department and local industry partners to tarnish our collective professional reputations across the regional architecture labor market. He'd viewed my consistent cross-regional industry acclaim as a direct threat to his absolute unilateral authority over Hale's corporate operations for years, and this zero-bonus announcement had been carefully orchestrated to bait our crew into a reaction he could exploit to push all 17 of us out the door in one sweeping mass layoff without financial liability on the firm's part. I slowly lifted the stemmed burgundy wine glass resting atop the linen tablecloth before me, tilting the crystal tumbler upward in a quiet, wordless silent toast directed straight toward the stage where Paul stood mid-speech, my facial features relaxed into a calm, unperturbed neutral expression that caught him entirely off guard, shattering the rigid scripted rebuttal dialogue he'd pre-planned to deploy against an expected angry outburst from my direction. I tipped the glass back in one smooth, unhurried motion, draining the full vintage red wine in a single swallow before setting the empty crystal vessel back down without a single harsh movement or sharp-spoken word to break the banquet hall's tense hush. Paul's polished, self-assured stage demeanor fractured instantly, faint confused creases etching themselves across his forehead as his prepared talking points crumbled beneath the weight of my unemotional, unresponsive quietude. He'd pre-coordinated venue security staff to stand by the side exit doorways ready to intervene if our design crew grew disruptive, drafted pages of counter-argument dialogue to paint us as entitled troublemakers, and rehearsed damage control soundbites for every local architecture industry newsletter. Yet my wordless silent toast stripped every ounce of his premeditated confrontation strategy of its intended power, leaving him forced to ad-lib disjointed filler remarks to recover his keynotes. Lost momentum as the banquet audience watched the silent charged exchange unfold between us from across the venue floor. The remainder of the awards banquet dragged on beneath an oppressive blanket of thick, awkward silence that clung to every linen tablecloth and polished marble surface in the ballroom. Paul rushed through the remaining minor department award presentations 10 minutes ahead of the pre-planned printed event agenda, announcing the firm's corporate offices would enter a full winter holiday shutdown effective the following morning, with all business operations suspended until January 8th of the new calendar year. Attendees filed out of the venue's glass front entrance in scattered, hesitant clusters. Every other department staff deliberately avoiding direct eye contact with our isolated design tables as they hurried toward waiting rideshare vehicles and private parked cars in the underground garage beneath the event center. I chose not to drive back to my sparse downtown studio apartment once the banquet's formal proceedings concluded. Instead, I led all 16 of our design crew members through the silent glass office lobby of Hale's high-rise headquarters, riding the glass-walled passenger elevator all the way to the top-floor dedicated design studio we'd occupied for 6 consecutive years, the same open workspace that had hosted thousands upon thousands of shared late-night drafting marathons, collaborative problem-solving sessions, and quiet celebrations following major competition wins and client project sign-offs. I reached out to flip every bank of overhead fluorescent ceiling lights fully on the second our group crossed the studio's floor-to-ceiling glass partition entryway, flooding the expansive open-plan workspace with stark, brilliant white illumination that illuminated every mounted wall rendering, stacked scaled structural model, scuffed oak drafting table, and overflowing cabinet of technical reference manuals lining the room's lengthy perimeter walls. Not a single member of our crew spoke a solitary word as they filed in behind my frame. Every pair of tired, frustrated eyes remained locked steadily onto my figure, waiting for the clear, decisive action plan I had spent months quietly drafting in secret anticipation of this exact moment of corporate betrayal and unfair compensation stripping. I had functioned as the steady, unshakable backbone holding this fiercely loyal group of creative and technical specialists together through 6 years of underappreciated labor, and as long as I maintained a level-headed, unpanicked bearing, none of them would sink into crippling despair or make impulsive, career-damaging reactive choices against Paul and his executive board. I stepped forward to plant my feet dead center of the studio's wide-open floor space, rotating slowly to meet every individual's gaze one by one, cataloging each familiar face etched with a layered mix of professional exhaustion, simmering resentment, and quiet, unspoken hurt. Leo, the structural engineering specialist I'd mentored through every steep learning curve from raw graduate intern to senior lead role. Marcus Reed, our lead commercial steel framing engineer whose iterative blueprint revisions had trimmed hundreds of thousands of dollars in raw construction material costs from dozens of client development projects. Chloe Bennett, our sole senior rendering artist who'd logged nearly 300 unpaid after-hours overtime shifts that calendar year alone, while juggling round-the-clock infant childcare responsibilities for her newborn son, alongside Jasper, Tyler, Milo, Elias, Clara, Dean, and 8 other highly skilled licensed architects, spatial planners, and technical draftsmen who'd sacrificed countless personal evenings, weekend gatherings, and family holidays to hit every unforgiving project deadline Paul had arbitrarily imposed upon our department without supplementary pay or extra time off in exchange. Every single one of these 17 dedicated professionals had poured their unique creative talent, technical expertise, and limited personal free time into building Hale's national and international industry prestige, only to be publicly dismissed and financially penalized for the sake of the CEO's shallow brand expansion vanity project that delivered zero long-term sustainable profit to the firm's core bottom line. My voice carried clear, unwavering resonance across the vast silent studio space, volume soft yet sharp with unshakable quiet resolve that cut effortlessly through the heavy air thick with collective frustration. Each and every one of you witnessed exactly what unfolded inside that banquet hall's keynote stage tonight. Paul Henderson openly dismissed 6 full years of our award-winning, revenue-generating design work as nothing more than stagnant, worthless legacy maintenance labor, stripping every dollar of our collectively earned year-end bonus funding with a single unilateral executive memo and public keynote address delivered before hundreds of industry witnesses. He claims our team lacks the bold forward expansion drive he deems the firm's sole strategic priority moving forward. I paused, letting the weight of those demeaning public words sink fully into every crew member's mind as I scanned the tense, tight-jawed faces lined up before me, then posed a single unifying rhetorical question that hung suspended in the lit studio atmosphere. Does any person within this room believe that judgment is fair, or even remotely grounded in factual corporate fiscal data tracking our division's proven profit output? A thunderous, unified roar erupted in immediate response, bouncing hard off the plastered studio walls and rattling the framed renderings hanging along every vertical surface. Not a single voice among our 17-person crew hesitated to shout a vehement collective denial in synchronized unison. Leo surged a single hurried step forward, his eyes glistening with restrained emotional frustration as his voice cracked mid-sentence from 6 years of accumulated unrecognized sacrifice. That civic cultural center we spent half a year refining through 17 full structural revision cycles pulled $1.7 million in pure design fee revenue straight into this firm's corporate bank accounts. Client post-project satisfaction survey scores hit a 99% positive approval rating across every submitted review form, and now our entire department is written off as unambitious custodians of outdated business contracts. Marcus slammed a bound leather structural blueprint binder down hard against the nearest oak drafting tabletop, the thick stack of engineering schematics colliding with the wooden surface to produce a sharp echoing crack reverberating through the quiet studio air. I reworked that downtown high-rise primary load-bearing steel framing layout 17 separate iterative drafts to slash 14% of the client's total raw construction material expenditure budget, cutting hundreds of thousands from their overall build costs, and Paul never once bothered to schedule a single private meeting to review the comprehensive cost-saving engineering reports I submitted directly to his executive office inbox. Chloe folded her arms tight across her chest, lower lip trembling faintly as she recounted the endless nights she'd traded sleep and infant bedtime routines for workstation rendering marathons to hit the flagship mixed-use tower's non-negotiable delivery deadline this past summer. My son was barely a month old when that project's final render submission date landed on the calendar. I pulled nearly 300 extra uncompensated after-hours shifts to polish every layered lighting and texture detail, skipping nightly feedings and weekend family visits to keep Hale's project pipeline on track. And this is the official corporate gratitude we receive in return: zero bonus, zero public recognition, zero acknowledgement of all that sacrificed personal time. I lifted one open palm high to signal immediate collective quiet, and the entire expansive studio fell silent within a single heartbeat. Every furious outburst cut short mid-sentence as all 16 remaining crew members locked their eyes back onto my stationary frame, waiting for the fully mapped-out exit strategy I'd spent 12 consecutive months drafting in secret anticipation of this exact corporate betrayal scenario. I know many of you have spent the past hour mentally drafting angry formal protest emails to submit to Human Resources tomorrow morning. I know several crew members have researched local regional labor mediation board filing procedures to pursue legal recoupment of unpaid overtime and withheld performance compensation owed to our department this fiscal cycle. I slowly shook my head from side to side, tone steady, grounded, and stripped of impulsive emotional flair as I laid out the critical fatal flaw embedded within that reactive line of thinking. Neither unplanned direct confrontation with Paul's executive team nor formal third-party labor mediation filings will deliver genuine, lasting justice to every member of our crew from a man as manipulative, power-hungry, and unethically calculating as Paul Henderson. He holds absolute unilateral control over every layer of Hale's corporate hierarchical structure, and every formal complaint our design division lodges will be deliberately twisted and misrepresented within internal memos circulated to every department, painting all 17 of us as hostile, uncooperative troublemakers whose professional reputations will be permanently tarnished across every regional architecture firm and development client network within weeks of filing official grievances. I unlocked my personal smartphone once more, pulling up a fully formatted, pre-written resignation template I'd saved to the group chat's shared cloud document storage folder weeks prior. Drafted in quiet preparation for the zero bonus verdict we'd all suspected was coming for months ahead of the banquet announcement. Tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock sharp, every single member of this crew will print a physical hard copy of the formal resignation letter, hand-sign your full legal name at the document's bottom margin, and stack all completed signed paperwork in a neat uniform pile atop my lead design oak desk positioned at the studio's front entryway. Once every individual's resignation form has been submitted to that central stack, we will walk out of this corporate high-rise office building as a unified group to spend the full winter holiday shutdown period with our respective loved ones, completely untethered from work deadlines, client revision demands, and Paul's exploitative executive corporate agenda. 2 full weeks after the firm reopens for regular business operations on January 8th, January 16th precisely, I will escort all 17 founding partners through the front entrance of our brand new independent architectural design collective studio space, where every single one of you holds equal proportional founding equity ownership shares in every client project we conceptualize, engineer, and deliver moving forward into the new year and beyond. The vast open studio fell utterly silent for 3 long, suspended heartbeats as every crew member absorbed the full weight of the concrete promise I'd laid out before them without vague loopholes or half-hearted compromise. Then Leo's thumb tapped rapidly against his mobile screen, typing the single unyielding word "leave" into the 13 Architects group chat feed and hitting send without a single second's hesitation for second-guessing. One after another, every remaining 16 staff members retrieved their personal smartphones from jacket pockets and desk drawers, tapping identical one-word replies into the shared digital thread. Overlapping notification chimes ringing out in constant cascading waves across the quiet, expansive workspace. Leave. 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 17 matching concise short messages line the top of the chat window's feed, forming an unbreakable unified front forged from 6 consecutive years of shared unpaid overtime, unacknowledged creative achievement, and unforgivable corporate mistreatment at Paul Henderson's hands. A faint, cold, calculated smirk tugged at the edge of my jaw as I mentally replayed every dismissive, demeaning phrase the CEO had spoken into the banquet stage's wireless microphone hours earlier that evening. A quiet resolve settling deep within my chest. You claim our crew only possesses the skill set to maintain pre-existing business partnerships, with zero capacity for bold new market expansion? Very well then. Watch closely as we strip every profitable long-term client contract, every high-value industry development connection, and every award-winning proprietary design framework your entire corporate revenue stream relies on straight out from beneath your feet once the new calendar year officially commences. The following morning arrived crisp, frigid, and overcast. A thin sheet of crystalline winter frost frosting every exterior glass pane of the downtown office high-rise tower as all 17 members of our design crew filed in unison through the marble lobby front entrance at precisely 8:30 a.m. Not a single individual running late or submitting a last-minute written request for flexible personal time off to avoid the day's critical resignation paperwork submission. Every fully completed, hand-signed formal resignation document lay stacked into a thick, uniform rectangular pile atop my polished walnut lead design desk by 9 o'clock sharp without exception, each printed page formatted with measured, respectful professional language free of hostile accusatory rhetoric, every full legal signature scrawled legibly across the document's bottom margin in dark black archival ink. I reached out to lift the landline office telephone receiver resting beside my multi-monitor workstation and dialed the internal Human Resources Department extension number printed on the building's corporate directory plaque mounted beside the desk frame. Sarah Moore, Hale's long-serving head Human Resources Administrator of 15 consecutive years, answered the line with bright, oblivious professional cheerfulness, entirely unaware of the seismic mass resignation crisis waiting to unfold within our top-floor design studio. Once, she crossed the glass partition threshold separating the workspace from the building's central hallway. Her voice carried light, unconcerned warmth through the handset speaker as she agreed to visit our studio within exactly 3 minutes' time to discuss the routine administrative matter I'd referenced on the call. Exactly 180 seconds later, the Human Resources Department's glass entry door swung inward on silent hydraulic hinges, Sarah stepping across the studio's threshold with relaxed, composed professional poise that froze instantly the split second her gray irises landed upon the towering thick stack of signed resignation letters dominating the polished walnut desktop surface. Her light gray eyes widened with unbridled, unmasked shock, every trace of casual workplace cordiality draining completely from her facial features in a single sharp shift of expression. One hand flying upward to press hard against her chest as her steady breathing hitched with nervous alarm. "Ethan, what massive volume of paperwork is this sitting atop your lead design desk?" she stammered, voice thin and shaky beneath the studio's soft overhead fluorescent lighting. every syllable tinged with raw panic at the catastrophic operational fallout she could instantly predict would cripple Hale's day-to-day client project workflow without our entire core design crew's expertise to rely upon. I leaned back comfortably against the padded high-back leather executive chair framing my workstation, tone calm, unemotional and entirely free of aggressive confrontation, as I laid out the straightforward formal context behind the towering stack of signed paperwork before her gaze. This constitutes a collective coordinated formal notice of voluntary resignation submitted by every full-time staff member comprising Hale's entire architecture and design division, Sarah. Each individual crew member has independently reached the shared professional conclusion our unique creative skill sets and long-term career growth objectives are no longer aligned with the revised corporate priority framework the executive board enacted via last week's unanimous fiscal vote and yesterday's banquet keynote address. We intend to step down voluntarily to vacate our current staff positions and create open internal hiring slots for external new talent whose forward-focused expansion mindsets better match Paul Henderson's stated strategic growth vision for the firm's marketing-centric operational restructuring moving forward into next year's fiscal cycle. Sarah's facial complexion drained pale as unbleached office printer paper, all natural warm pigment vanishing from her cheekbones as her mind rapidly tallied every devastating operational consequence a full-mass exit of our award-winning core design team would unleash upon Hale's client project pipeline. Without our 17 licensed architects, structural engineers, and specialized rendering artists, every active ongoing residential, commercial, and municipal development project the firm held binding signed contracts to deliver would grind to an immediate indefinite halt, leaving the corporate leadership vulnerable to costly client breach of contract legal lawsuits and irreversible reputational damage within regional real estate development circles. She hurried forward one shaky, rapid pace across the studio's linoleum flooring surface, both hands raised in a placating, desperate conciliatory gesture as she scrambled to negotiate a last-minute reversal of our unified mass resignation decision before formal filing with corporate legal departments. Please hold off on formally logging all of these exit notices within the firm's HR digital record system for at least 48 hours. Allow me to schedule an emergency closed-door private executive meeting with Paul this exact morning to fully revisit and renegotiate the year-end bonus allocation policy the board finalized last week. I am fully confident we can draft a revised, fair compensation package tailored to address every grievance your design crew has voiced, restoring equitable performance payouts for this fiscal cycle without delay. I shook my head gently from left to right, my unshakable resolve evident beneath the soft, even neutral tone I maintained while responding to her rushed mediation attempt. Every individual whose legal signature appears upon these resignation documents has submitted a fully compliant 30-day advance voluntary exit notice in strict adherence to every binding clause outlined within our official corporate employment contracts distributed at hiring onboarding. Our entire crew will complete every outstanding ongoing project task, compile exhaustive indexed organized handover binders filled with all active client blueprint files, finished render assets, and detailed project progress tracking logs, and deliver fully organized, complete project handoff materials to whatever replacement design staff the firm hires to fill our vacant roles prior to our official 30-day termination deadlines arriving 1 full month from today. Our team intends to faithfully fulfill every professional contractual obligation we agreed to uphold upon signing employment paperwork 6 years prior. We only ask corporate executive leadership reciprocate with basic respectful acknowledgement of our collective personal career choice to pursue independent creative opportunities outside Hale's restructured marketing-focused corporate framework. Sarah's lips parted repeatedly as she scrambled to formulate additional compromise talking points and delay tactics, yet no coherent logical sentences emerged from her throat amid mounting panic. She stood frozen motionless for 10 full uninterrupted seconds, eyes locked upon the mountain of signed resignation paperwork spread across my walnut desktop surface, then pivoted sharply on the heel of her leather professional dress shoes and rushed toward the glass-walled passenger elevator bank at a near sprint, clearly bound straight for Paul's private 35th floor executive suite to relay the catastrophic mass resignation news she'd uncovered within our top floor design studio. Workspace. Barely 20 minutes had passed since Sarah's panicked hurried exit from our studio before the internal office landline telephone buzzed once, with an urgent incoming intercom summons routed straight from the executive wing's administrative reception desk. The automated receptionist voice relayed a direct formal request for an immediate one-on-one closed-door private conference with Paul Henderson within his mahogany-paneled executive office suite on the building's highest corporate floor. I smoothed out minor creases along the tailored wool blazer's sleeve cuffs, straightened the crisp white collared dress shirt beneath the outer layer, and strode steadily down the quiet carpeted executive hallway stretching toward the far western tower wing housing the CEO's isolated private office space. The heavy solid oak executive suite door creaked open with a low, drawn-out groan the instant I pressed a palm against its polished brass lever handle, a thick stagnant cloud of stale tobacco cigarette smoke washing over my facial features the second I crossed the room's enclosed threshold into the airspace of Paul's oversized custom workspace. Paul sat hunched forward at the edge of an enormous handcrafted walnut executive desk rumored to have cost $20,000 to commission from a premium luxury, bespoke furniture artisan. His large knuckles whitened tight with unbridled rage as they gripped the desk's polished hardwood front edge. A shattered ceramic decorative coffee mug lay split into jagged broken shards scattered across the expensive handwoven wool area rug spread beneath his leather executive chair, dark brown brood. Coffee stains seeping deep into the fabric's intricate woven pattern beneath the debris fragments. Ethan. He snarled my full legal given name through clenched, gritted teeth, every single spoken syllable sharp with explosive unfiltered fury. His vocal volume rising into a thunderous resonant shout that echoed off the floor-to-ceiling solid mahogany wall panels lining the entire executive suite perimeter. What calculated malicious power play do you believe you're orchestrating by coordinating a full-mass coordinated walkout of your entire core design crew? Are you deliberately attempting to blackmail this firm's executive board into rewriting the year-end bonus policy solely to satisfy your petty personal workplace grievances against corporate restructuring decisions? I lowered myself slowly into the padded upholstered visitor chair positioned directly across the wide polished walnut desk partition separating our two frames, maintaining a placid, entirely unruffled, neutral facial expression as I responded to his enraged accusation without a single trace of defensive anger or reactive hostility coloring my measured spoken tone. This coordinated collective submission of voluntary exit paperwork does not constitute blackmail of any description whatsoever, Paul. It is a fully compliant group resignation submitted in strict full accordance with every binding term, condition and advance notice requirement printed within our formal signed corporate employment agreements, distributed at initial onboarding 6 years prior. A bitter, scathing sneer twisted Paul's tight facial features as he gathered the thick stacked pile of signed resignation letters between both palms and tossed the heavy bundle hard across the polished walnut desk surface, the stack sliding forward to grind to a halt directly before my crossed forearms resting atop the desk's front edge. You claim this is merely standard voluntary resignation paperwork? Do you truly harbor the delusional belief that you wield sufficient professional leverage to cripple Hale's multi-million-dollar client project pipeline by walking out with a handful of junior architects and engineering staff? There exists an endless, overflowing surplus of newly licensed architectural graduates flooding every regional urban industry job market month after month. I can fully recruit and onboard complete replacement design teams to fill every vacant workstation within 10 standard business days without encountering the slightest operational delay, no matter how many half-finished client developments your crew abandons mid-drafting cycle. His shouting volume climbed higher with every furious consecutive sentence, tiny flecks of spittle flecking the surface of the leather desk blotter spread across the walnut desktop as he leaned aggressively forward over the partition separating us, his tall frame towering over my seated form from the elevated executive chair's higher seating position. I waited patiently in complete silence for his full raging tirade to burn itself out entirely, allowing the weight of his hollow, empty, arrogant threats to hang thick within the smoke-saturated executive suite airspace before responding in a slow, deliberate, unhurried cadence that systematically stripped every ounce of his manufactured intimidation tactic of its intended psychological power. If you genuinely hold the unshakable conviction that fully licensed, client-vetted architectural design and engineering specialists function as interchangeable disposable labor commodities available for instant hire at any moment's notice to fill empty workstation slots, there exists zero logical corporate reasoning for you to object to formal processing of all 17 crew members' submitted resignation paperwork without drawn-out delay or protracted negotiation efforts. Feel free to immediately post every vacant design division job opening across every regional architecture, industry recruitment portal, and professional network platform. Recruit whatever replacement junior and senior staff you claim can be onboarded within 10 working days, and our entire crew will happily compile comprehensive organized handover documentation packages for seamless transition to their incoming supervision once our 30-day advance notice contractual windows formally expire. Paul's furious verbal rant ground to an abrupt, jarring dead halt mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open slack as he struggled to formulate a cutting, retaliatory retort capable of countering my calm, unflappable logical reasoning. He stared deep into my eye sockets for nearly 60 uninterrupted full seconds, scanning every micro-expression crossing my facial features in a desperate hunt for any flicker of hidden fear, hesitation, or bargaining willingness he could exploit to force a last-minute compromise out of my position. Yet he uncovered absolutely no trace of the weakness he'd spent months anticipating and preparing to weaponize against our design crew's collective demands. After the lengthy tense silent pause stretched on without resolution between us, his explosive fiery anger deflated entirely from his posture. Rigid aggressive shoulders slumping forward as he switched to deploy a rehearsed manipulative appeal to personal loyalty he'd refined over 15 years of managing underpaid, overworked junior creative staff across multiple regional firm locations. He let out an overdramatic, weighted sigh and leaned back deep into the oversized padded leather executive chair behind the walnut desk, artificially softening his vocal register into a warm, paternal performative tone transparently crafted to manufacture superficial sympathy from neutral onlookers. If any administrative staff had been present within the suite, Ethan, I personally watched you evolve from a nervous, inexperienced 22-year-old fresh architecture school graduate straight into a widely regionally recognized lead design director with cross-state industry acclaim and competition award credentials to your name. I took a calculated high-risk, professional chance on your unpolished entry-level student portfolio back when every rival local architecture firm passed over your application without a second glance, and personally nurtured every high-profile client opportunity and international competition submission that built your public professional reputation across the past 6 consecutive fiscal years. Do you not feel even the smallest shred of reciprocal personal loyalty or heartfelt gratitude toward the career advancement opportunities this corporate firm uniquely afforded you at the start of your professional journey? A quiet, sardonic low rumble of restrained laughter stirred deep within my chest, held back just enough to avoid crossing into outright workplace disrespect as I formulated a measured, level-headed rebuttal addressing his hollow appeal to one-sided loyalty. I have never once forgotten the critical entry-level professional break you granted me fresh out of university graduation, Paul. That exact sense of initial gratitude is the sole driving factor that compelled me to volunteer for every uncompensated after-hours overtime drafting session, sacrifice every personal weekend holiday break to hit arbitrarily tight client project deadlines, and build Hale's award-winning international design brand from a blank digital canvas alongside every dedicated member of our 17-person creative crew across 6 straight years of unrelenting round-the-clock labor. I believed I had fully repaid that initial career opportunity through consistent record-breaking client project revenue generation and cross-regional industry prestige building for this firm's corporate brand identity. Genuine reciprocal gratitude, however, operates as a two-way balanced exchange dynamic between employer and staff. A corporate enterprise demonstrates sincere appreciation for its team's exhausting creative and technical labor through fair, timely performance compensation and public acknowledgement of milestone creative achievements, while employees reciprocate that respectful treatment with consistent dedicated long-term service aligned to the firm's core business objectives. When only one single side of that reciprocal exchange relationship continuously sacrifices personal time, creative energy, and mental well-being without receiving any corresponding recognition or equitable financial reward in return, the dynamic ceases to qualify as mutual loyalty. It devolves into exploitative one-sided extraction of unpaid labor for executive profit gain. Disrespectful, ungrateful insubordination. Paul roared once more, all thin veneer of manufactured warm paternalism vanishing from his demeanor in a single heartbeat, his heavy palm slamming hard against the walnut desk surface to produce a sharp echoing crack that reverberated through every corner of the enclosed smoke-filled executive suite space. I will pose one final unnegotiable ultimatum question directly to your face. Will you collect every individual signed resignation form stacked upon this desk and formally submit a full, universal retraction of all voluntary exit notices before we proceed any further with this hostile conversation? I pushed myself fully upright out of the upholstered visitor chair, straightening the hem of my tailored wool blazer as I rose to a complete standing vertical position before the oversized executive desk partition separating us, my spoken voice steady, unyielding, and entirely free of wavering uncertainty across every syllable delivered. All resignation paperwork has already been digitally logged and permanently archived within the firm's secure human resources cloud filing system platform. Earlier this morning, no administrative protocol or internal corporate policy exists to facilitate formal mass retraction of fully submitted 30-day advance exit notices signed under every crew member's individual legal authority. 30 full calendar days from today's date, our entire design division crew will complete every required client project handover documentation protocol and sever every binding professional contractual tie to Hale architecture for permanent good. With that final definitive closing statement delivered without supplementary elaboration or lingering negotiation window, I pivoted sharply on my leather dress shoe heel and marched straight toward the heavy oak executive suite exit door frame, not sparing a single backward glance at Paul's seething, enraged facial expression as I crossed the threshold out into the quiet carpeted executive hallway corridor stretching away from the isolated top-floor office wing. The loud crash of another heavy ceramic decorative desk ornament slamming violently against the walnut desktop echoed down the empty hallway 10 full seconds after the oak door latched shut behind my departing frame, yet I maintained a steady, unbroken walking stride without pausing or slowing my forward momentum, my mental focus already fully anchored upon the independent architectural collective legal incorporation paperwork I'd spent 12 uninterrupted months drafting, refining, and securing private seed investment capital for in complete secret anticipation of this exact day of mass corporate betrayal at Paul Henderson's hands. Paul ultimately signed off on processing every single individual voluntary resignation notice submitted by our 17-person design crew without attempting further last-minute mediation efforts, his towering, unchecked corporate pride overriding every logical sense of long-term business self-preservation that might have pushed him to negotiate a revised, equitable bonus compensation package to retain our irreplaceable core creative and engineering talent pool. In his skewed, self-centered line of corporate reasoning, a temporary multi-month period of costly external recruitment spending to fill all vacant design workstation roles was a far more palatable professional alternative than swallowing his personal ego and publicly admitting the firm's entire annual profit stream depended upon the creative labor of the crew he'd publicly dismissed as static maintenance workers at the awards banquet weeks prior. The day immediately preceding Hale's official winter holiday shutdown launch, Paul scheduled a mandatory all-staff auditorium assembly hosted within the building's ground floor event venue, drafting a hastily constructed damage control retention tactic designed to split our unified design crew apart before our 30-day advance notice window expired and our coordinated mass exit became legally binding. Standing beneath the auditorium's overhead broadcast projection screens, Paul announced into every venue wall-mounted microphone that any single design division staff member willing to formally rescind their signed resignation paperwork would receive a 100% doubling of their originally allocated year-end performance bonus, paired with a permanent 30% upward adjustment applied to their base annual salary payroll moving forward into the new fiscal cycle, a calculated, inflated financial bribe he naively believed would instantly fracture our 6 years of shared collective loyalty to one another. His manipulative retention gambit landed with complete, total, unmitigated failure, not a single architect, engineer, or rendering artist within our 17-person crew entertaining the remote idea of abandoning our mutually agreed unified exit strategy for short-term salary gain. Within mere minutes of the assembly's closing adjournment, Leo typed a blunt, unflinching first-hand account of Paul's one-on-one private post-assembly recruitment pitch into the 13 Architects group chat feed. He pulled me aside alone after the General Staff Assembly and offered a permanent $50,000 annual base salary raise if I abandon the entire design crew and remain employed at Hale by myself. I told him Ethan's collective creative team is the only professional workplace I will ever choose to occupy, no matter how large a financial pay raise he attempts to dangle as isolated personal incentive. Marcus followed suit with his own candid, unwavering response posted to the shared digital thread minutes later. Paul separated me from the rest of the crew for a private closed-door meeting post-speech, promising unlimited multi-million-dollar project budget allocations and a dedicated standalone private drafting studio exclusive to my sole use as personal retention bait. Higher base pay means nothing when I'm forced to swallow unrelenting public disrespect and demeaning executive judgment every awards banquet season. Chloe sent a dry, sardonic text emoji alongside her personal recount of the CEO's targeted retention attempt directed solely at her senior rendering position. He even committed to custom flexible infant childcare scheduling and a brand new top-tier industrial rendering workstation reserved only for my daily use, as if exclusive office hardware could erase the 300 unpaid overtime shifts I logged last summer to hit his non-negotiable mixed-use tower deadline. I sat reading the steady stream of unified loyalty messages scrolling upward across my smartphone's digital chat window, a quiet swell of warm, bittersweet emotion tightening my throat as I reflected upon the genuine, unbreakable communal bond forged between every member of our design crew over 6 years of shared late-night drafting marathons and unrecognized industry milestone achievements. Not one of these highly sought-after, regionally renowned licensed technical specialists plan to follow my coordinated exit lead for trivial marginal pay increases or fancy private office corporate perks. Every single one of them aligned with our mass resignation strategy out of a deep, burning desire to secure a future professional workspace where their creative vision, technical expertise, and personal sacrifice would receive genuine acknowledgement and equitable financial compensation, rather than being casually discarded and publicly belittled as disposable maintenance labor to inflate the CEO's quarterly shareholder profit margins. Paul's transparent, clumsy attempt to divide our tight-knit creative crew with individualized inflated salary incentives stood as the deepest personal insult every member of our team could imagine enduring after 6 consecutive fiscal years of uncompensated overtime and uncelebrated award-winning project delivery. The following morning marked the final full operational workday before Hale's corporate offices entered winter holiday shutdown mode. All 17 design crew members exited the building's glass marble lobby in a loose unified formation, each signed formal resignation confirmation slip tucked securely within inner winter coat pockets. The immense cumulative weight of 6 years of unappreciated creative labor partially lifted from our collective shoulders with every measured step we took away from the downtown glass high-rise tower that had hosted thousands of grueling late-night drafting sessions and bitter acts of corporate betrayal at Paul Henderson's hands. Hidden deep within the encrypted secure document folders stored on my personal smartphone's cloud storage drive sat fully finalized, professionally vetted legal limited liability company incorporation paperwork for our brand new independent creative practice, officially registered under the business name 13 Design Collective, a deliberate, Heartfelt nod to our long-standing group chat moniker that had bound every founding partner together through 6 years of shared workplace hardship and unacknowledged creative achievement. My full legal name appeared listed first on every state business registration filing document as founding chief design officer and majority equity stakeholder, with each of the remaining 16 design crew members formally documented as equal proportional founding partners holding shared ownership rights across every client project our collective studio would conceptualize, engineer, and deliver moving forward into the new calendar year. I owed a quiet, unspoken debt of gratitude toward Paul Henderson for inadvertently handing us the perfect irreversible catalyst to sever every binding professional tie to his exploitative marketing-obsessed corporate enterprise, clearing an unobstructed wide path to build a fully employee-owned creative practice governed by mutual reciprocal respect, transparent, equitable compensation, and unfiltered collaborative creative autonomy rather than executive greed and superficial brand vanity metrics, prioritized above every team member's livelihood. The 30-day advance notice handover window that followed Hale's winter holiday shutdown unfolded in a meticulously organized, comprehensively documented transfer process Paul had never remotely anticipated or prepared for, simultaneously stripping his corporate firm of every proprietary design framework, long-term client relationship, and industry reputation advantage our crew had cultivated across 6 consecutive years of award-winning development work. Every active ongoing residential, commercial, and municipal client project file, archived structural engineering blueprint, high-resolution digital rendering asset, and chronological thread of formal client email communication was systematically sorted, categorized, and bound into color-coded, fully indexed handover binders intended for the replacement design leadership team Paul rushed to recruit from competing regional architecture firms with inflated starting salary packages meant to poach top external talent away from rival local design studios. The lead replacement design director Paul successfully headhunted from a mid-sized regional competitor firm was a man named Richard Voss, an overly self-assured, arrogant architect who carried an air of unearned professional superiority into every cross-team handover review meeting we coordinated with his hastily assembled junior replacement design staff cohort. Richard flipped through our neatly tabulated, meticulously organized handover binders with a dismissive casual flick of his fountain pen wrist, interjecting occasional offhand commentary laced with patronizing condescension intended to broadcast his self-proclaimed superior decades of industry experience to every junior designer standing beside him during formal document walkthrough sessions. This organizational filing framework is passably well-structured, I'll reluctantly concede, he remarked, with a faint sneering lilt in his speaking voice, tapping a printed structural cross-section blueprint with the fountain pen's metallic tip as he spoke. I've managed far larger multi-billion-dollar, mixed-use development portfolios during my prior tenure at competing downtown architecture practices, so every minor project specification contained within these binders poses 0 complex, unresolvable engineering challenges for my newly assembled replacement crew to resolve without your former design team's oversight or contextual input. He shot me a fleeting, pitying sideways glance as he delivered that arrogant assessment, the unspoken underlying implication crystal clear within his body language. He viewed our 6 years of internationally award-winning landmark design output as amateur-level preliminary drafts easily replicated without the granular institutional client and engineering context only our founding collective crew possessed. I offered Richard a neutral, non-committal closed-mouth smile in response, choosing to withhold any corrective elaboration on the critical unwritten layered complexities embedded within every archived project file we'd formally packaged for corporate compliance handover purposes. The glossy Civic Cultural Center renderings and multi-phase structural blueprints stacked thick within the top handover binder appeared straightforward and standardized on printed paper surfaces. Yet, 7 distinct load-bearing steel joint reinforcement iterative redesigns existed within the core building frame that Leo and I had spent 17 grueling revision cycles refining to eliminate catastrophic structural collapse risk scenarios. Every formal handover document only recorded the final approved dimensional measurements without logging the exhaustive failure test data and iterative engineering reasoning behind each critical structural compromise we'd negotiated with external construction contractors for cost and safety balance. The downtown mixed-use high-rise complex's layered digital rendering archive folders contained hundreds of finely calibrated lighting gradient and texture adjustment parameters Chloe had fine-tuned across hundreds of all-night workstation sessions to match the lead developer's hyper-specific aesthetic vision requirements, yet the standardized handover paperwork only listed generic rendering software factory default presets with zero notation of the subtle layered color and shadow tweaks required to recreate the client's signed-off final visual tone and atmosphere preferences. Most consequential of all the hidden institutional knowledge gaps we deliberately omitted from surface-level handover documentation were the 3 legacy long-term development clients whose multi-year repeat construction contracts generated 65% of Hale's total annual gross profit stream. Every generic handover binder included basic surface-level corporate contact information and standardized signed project deliverable completion checklists, yet none contained the granular private client preference notes I'd accumulated across 6 years of direct collaborative in-person meeting sessions. Rigid internal annual budget hard caps each executive developer refused to cross under any project revision circumstance, unspoken aesthetic dislikes they would never commit to formal written feedback correspondence, internal corporate decision-maker hierarchical chains dictating every project approval timeline bottleneck, and encrypted private mobile communication channels they exclusively utilize to share urgent last-minute design feedback outside standard corporate email inboxes monitored by Hale's marketing administrative staff. Richard and his hastily recruited replacement design crew would legally possess every surface-level archive document required to assume nominal ownership of our active client project pipeline inventory. Yet they lacked the 6 years of accumulated unwritten institutional client rapport and engineering problem-solving context that separated a passable generic development draft from a fully client-aligned, repeat contract-generating finished landmark build capable of sustaining Hale's annual revenue stream. Long-term. As the 30-day handover calendar ticked steadily toward its final formal termination deadline, I watched Richard's initial arrogant overconfidence erode week by measured week. His junior replacement design staff firing off dozens of frantic after-hours email inquiries routed straight to Paul's executive office inbox every evening, begging for clarification on unaddressed structural ambiguities and client aesthetic demand gaps our formal handover binders had deliberately omitted critical, contextual background information to resolve. Each unresolvable project complication landed on Paul's desk one after another, chipping away at the overinflated self-confidence he'd held in his ability to effortlessly replace our irreplaceable core design talent pool with external junior hires. The catastrophic operational fallout of his banquet room zero bonus decision slowly unfolding exactly as I'd mapped out across months of pre-planning prior to the award ceremony. On the final official handover deadline date, our entire 17-person crew gathered to lock every archived blueprint, render asset and client communication binder inside Hale's secure climate-controlled corporate file storage closet designated exclusively for the replacement design team's unrestricted permanent future access. I collected my personal drafting tools, framed international architecture competition trophy certificates, and worn leather student design portfolios from my dedicated lead design workstation, exiting the downtown glass high-rise tower alongside all 16 founding 13 design collective partners as a unified coordinated group. The wide-open professional road stretched forward ahead of every single one of us, lined with unlimited creative autonomy, transparent equitable profit sharing, and reciprocal team respect. We'd spent 6 grueling consecutive years sacrificing personal time and mental well-being to fight for within the exploitative corporate confines of Hale Architecture's marketing-obsessed executive framework.